tell you a tale of an ill-fated band and a fame that was not to be. Alright, that's enough of that crap. Well, here we are. It is story time, ladies and gentlemen. And I've never told this tale well, I've told part of it in my little biography video, but I've never fully told, I don't know, the whole detailed saga, and it is a saga. So, shall I start? Okay, here it is. This is the Saga of Devine Rite. Sorry, I was just kind of wiping some dust off my old acoustic, which I hardly ever pick up. Anyway. Back in the late 80s, I just graduated high school, and it was kind of a time of upheaval. Whatever. What do you want for nothing? I'm not the greatest narrator in the world. Anyway, so we're gathering along, and I just lost my train of thought. Okay, hold on, wait a minute. Oh, there it is, it's back. Okay, so anyway. This is really becoming a Monty Python episode, isn't it? It is. Okay, so back in the late 1980s, I was graduating high school. There was a lot of upheaval going on and, different things going on in my life where I was kind of trying to decide if I wanted to stick around or not, where I was, and a lot of traveling, moving, living in different places, and then finally settled back in with my family because it was a lot more difficult out there than my high school brain was ready to comprehend. So I helped my parents move up from Connecticut to New Hampshire, and with the promise of a new car, well, a used car from my father for helping to move all the stuff. So I did that. We got from Connecticut to New Hampshire, settled in, and I got a car, and it was a piece of crap, but hey, it was my first car, and everybody's first car is usually a piece of crap. So it got me where I wanted to go. And I was going to the local movie theater because back in the late 80s, we didn't have the internet, so there wasn't a lot that we could do other than stay home, play video games, or go out to places like movie theaters and skating rinks and things along those lines. But here in the wilds of New Hampshire, all we had were just the movie theater and, various other places, but I didn't know about them yet since I was new. So I met up with this guy at a movie theater, and he was a good dude, and we got to be great friends, and we're still good friends to this day. In fact, he became our band manager, and excellent dude. And he was working at the movie theater, and I was eventually going to be working at that movie theater, but that's immaterial. And we started talking about bands, and he was listening to some Ozzy tapes, like No Rest for the Wicked and things like that. And I said, oh yeah, I love that stuff. I've been listening to Ozzy since Blizzard of Oz and all that crap. And eventually the conversation got around to where I'm a guitar player. And I'd been a guitar player since 1978, so this was in 1988 when this meeting took place. So I'd been playing for 10 years. And he said that he had some friends who were trying to form a band, and would I like to meet them? And I said, hell yeah. I'd been in bands before, and it'd be great. That'd be a great way to get to know people up here, and where I was new. So I agreed to meet with these guys. I met up with these guys at their house, and at the bass player's house, and we basically all hit it off right away. I didn't have an amp back then, so I was just kind of borrowing one. So I got together and played like that. And I was poor. I couldn't afford these things just yet. It wasn't working just yet in New Hampshire, so I didn't really have the means to buy an amp, which changed later. I bought an amp after saving up for it. And we formed a group and called it Devine Rite, spelled exactly like you see it on the screen. And it was just the three of us. And we were always trying to add a fourth guy. And it never really seemed to work out. We played for basically 3 years doing that, just with the three of us, and every so often we'd have a rhythm player, and it would never really work out. Problem was, we had people that were either drugs was a big factor, or the booze, or they were just posers and couldn't play a note, but they looked good. This was the late 80s, of course. And then there were those with prior commitments. We had an awesome rhythm player, and he was really, really good, and I wanted to keep him along, but, you know, there were other commitments that he had in life that took precedence over being in a band. So that kind of got in the way, and that fell apart. So we went back to being a three-piece again. We got pretty locally famous, even just the three of us, and we were doing things like signing autographs, doing benefits and appearances, and even interviews for college radio stations and college newspapers and all sorts of stuff like that. So things were starting to roll along for us. And then as soon as you start getting popular in a band, here's what goes on. The yes people come along. These are the people that come along and tell you how great you are, and they tell you how wonderful you are and how smart you are and how your ideas for the band is so much better than the other guy's ideas for the band. And there comes the turmoil. And so what happened was, the yes people started to inflate the bass player's head, and along comes this friend of his who had been in the army for several years, and he got added to the band by the bass player without the bass player asking myself or the drummer. And this guy joined our group, and he was a major, major narcissist. Now, a narcissist is someone who is kind of full of themselves, yes, but at the same time, a narcissist will, they don't care about other people's feelings. They only see people as objects, and the furtherment of their own ambitions take much bigger precedence over anything else. So they don't care who they step on to get their way. And this guy was 100% that. And he hated not being the center of attention. This guy would even stand in front of me if we had women watching our practices or some kind of appearances here and there. And if the women looked at me at all, he would come over and he would stand in front of me so they couldn't see me. And then he started complaining about me singing the songs that I actually wrote. See, I wrote a bulk of our originals, and the bass player wrote, you know, a small group, maybe a quarter of our originals were written by the bass player, and 75% of our originals were written by me. And he didn't even, this megalomaniac rhythm guitarist guy who was the bass player's good friend, he didn't like me singing my own songs, even though I sang perfectly fine. There was no complaints, and everybody loved it. People knew the words. They would sing the words back to me at some shows. I've seen people singing my own words back to me, so it was like, wow, this is really doing good. People were glomming onto my music. They were glomming onto our songs, and they were glomming onto the band as to what they were, and we were starting to move along and get big. So this new guy, he's not very happy, Mr. Narcissist. And he decides, oh, hey, you know, this band is not going anywhere, even though we had gigs lined up left and right. I mean, we were gigging pretty much every weekend to every other weekend, which was pretty good for up here and in the woods. So he decided that him and the bass player are going to go form another band. And that band was strictly for hardcore thrash metal, which wasn't really a big thing up here. And to tell you the honest truth, it never really has been, unless you're in the urban areas. And we had to gig wherever we could find the gigs. And we couldn't just focus on the urban areas for gigs. So they went off, formed this other band. It was like a second band. They were going to stay in Devine Rite and also form this second band. And the second band took precedence. It took all, you know, that was their priority. They focused on that. They started blowing off gigs for Devine Rite, and pretty soon nobody would book us anymore. It was just like somebody would book us, they'd be counting on us, we wouldn't show up, they'd have to hire a DJ, and that really becomes a very messy situation. And our contacts that were booking us and things like that, they just started to not book us anymore and just not care about us anymore. So the band fell apart and Devine Rite died. That was the death of Devine Rite, but oh, it doesn't end there. If only it just ended there, then this wouldn't be such a saga. So the drummer and I decided, you know, we're passionate about music, we love music, we want to form another band, and we're going to go elsewhere try and find somebody else, two other guys to form a band with. So we found this other guy and his friend, the bass player. And the bass player was really cool. He looked like Eric Brittenham, from the big blonde guy bass player from Cinderella. And he was really cool, really nice dude. And he was an excellent bass player. He had stage presence, awesome. But the other guy, his buddy, was a megalomaniac. And this guy was like, he was fresh out of Berklee School of Music, and his daddy had bought him all this expensive stuff and expensive guitars and PA equipment. So he had the bulk of the PA equipment. And he had control over the mixers and the power amps and stuff. And what he would do during our practices was, since he didn't want to share the spotlight with anybody, and he just wanted my drummer, he would unplug me while I was playing. I was only allowed to sing, and I'd be playing my guitar, and I would hit like a fake note just to see if I was making any noise, and I wasn't. And my amp going through the PA system, he was unplugging, and he was like down, putting the volume down so nobody could hear me, because he didn't want anybody stealing his spotlight. And he didn't like my playing, and he didn't think my playing was as good as his Berklee taught playing. So that fell apart like nobody's business. I walked out of that band, and soon the drummer did as well. And then the drummer just basically gave up playing in bands and enlisted in the army. And then got news that the bass player's band, his little thrash band that he formed with his little narcissistic buddy, fell apart as well, and he enlisted in the army, while the narcissistic dude went off and joined a religious cult and started selling stuff door to door and things like that. Who knows? But it just became, just nothing, and it just dropped off the face of the earth. I got married in a very bad situation, but that's where everything ended up. And I found out, I was speaking to the bass player's older brother, who had the house where we practiced. And it appears that 2 record companies came looking for us months after we had busted up, and both other guys were in the army. And the 2 record companies were Elektra and Metal Blade. Apparently some audio and videotapes had circulated around, and these 2 record companies were ready to sign us. In fact, they were getting ready to compete for us. We were that big at that time, at least in the Northeast, and it was great. But we weren't together anymore, and the only person left was me, and I didn't know about it until months after that. Well, yeah, I'd say about 6 to 8 months after that, I found out that they had come looking for us. And I was married with kids, and it was too late anyway. It was just disturbing, the whole situation at that point. And it was just very disappointing. To this day, I'll never forget that. I'll never forget how people came in to split up an excellent band. We had what it took to make it, and we were ready to be signed. We were ready to be famous, and we would have been if it hadn't been for one person coming along and convincing the bass player that another group was more important, that they should form another group, and that the current group, even though we're getting gigs, is not good enough because he wasn't getting the center of attention. So there are 2 morals of the story. 1, watch out for narcissists. Find out what a narcissist is and look out for them in your life. They are scum, and they will destroy anybody to further their own ends or boost up their own social status, including destroying bands and destroying people's lives too. So watch out for narcissists. Never marry one. Don't be friends with them. If you find one in your life, learn what they are, learn how to recognize them. If you find them in your life, just walk away slowly. They love drama, so you don't want to cause any big drama. Now the second moral of the story is keep an eye on your band. If you're a musician and you got a band going and you're not quite sure the loyalties are all the same, have a talk with your band. Make sure that everybody's on the same page, because bands like the Who and different groups where the members hate each other, if they're all on the same page, even if they hate each other personally, if they're all on the same page musically, as soon as they hop on the stage, they're professionals, that's another thing. But when there's animosity going on and there's somebody going on trying to destroy the group from within, you got to keep an eye on that and watch your back, because it could mean the difference between being famous and making videos on YouTube for the rest of your life. So that's my little saga. That is the saga of Devine, Rite, the biggest band I was a part of. I'd been part of many other bands after that, and even before then. But nothing was quite so big as Devine, Rite, and it's really, really disappointing that it never went anywhere because of that. So, moral of the story, watch your back. Thank you for listening if you got this far. And now, back to our regularly scheduled programming already in progress.